Hello again, and how are we all? Well, here we are in October. Now, okay, currently the date is the 26th, 6 days until Halloween, a time in which little children get excited, dressing up as all manner of ghosts and ghoulies, going out with their parents to score free candy to rot their teeth with and potentially become their dentist's worst nightmare. However, behind all of that, behind all of the plastic masks and the makeup and all the family-friendly tradition is horror. This is the season we indulge in the creepy, the macabre, the scary. So, in light of this occasion, oh my god, that narration then, how creepy was that, honestly? And I've compiled a short list of some of the creepiest tales that I personally have listened to, and I want to share them with all of you to get you really in the spirit for Halloween. This list will be formatted as such. It's going to start with the first entry being run-of-the-mill scary, and at number 1 we are going to have nightmare-fueled chaos. So, you have been warned. And the list itself is going to be comprised of a mix of creepypastas as well as some real-life events that happened on Halloween to really up the creepiness factor. Right. So that being said, viewer discretion is advised for that particular reason. Right. Enough with the boring intro. Let's get to the good creepy stuff with entry number 6. Number 6. Our first entry on this list comes from the channel Mr. Creepypasta, and of course, one popular creepypasta character was going to end up on this list either way, but this particular one I have absolutely no idea how it got so popular because it's kind of so run-of-the-mill, it's laughable. But of course I am talking about Jeff the Killer. So the basic story of Jeff the Killer is about a boy named Jeffrey who with his family have just recently moved to a new area, and on the way to catch the bus to school they are attacked by 3 bullies, and instead of giving in to their demands, Jeff attacks and injures the bullies themselves. Fearing that they are going to get into deep shit, they run away. Later the police come to the boy's home and Jeff's brother Lou ends up taking the rap for Jeff himself. And later on, there's a party and the bullies attack again and Jeff ends up horrifically burnt. After his stay in hospital and he's gone back home, Jeff begins his descent into what I could say is madness. His mother is then awakened one night by sounds coming from the bathroom, only to discover that Jeff has now burnt off his eyelids and carved a smile into his face with a knife. Horrified at what she has seen, she then goes back to her room to awaken the boy's father to get his gun, only to turn around and to see Jeff in the doorway, who then proceeds to kill his entire family. So, realistically, the story of Jeff the Killer is very run-of-the-mill. The best way I can really describe Jeff is he's your typical slasher in many respects, but the thing that is creepy about him is his appearance. He's basically what you get if you combine the slit-mouthed woman and Elle from Death Note. Or at least that was my interpretation. Of course, you could also say that Beyond Birthday from Death Note is a better fit because he looks exactly like Elle, except he's a serial killer. That's basically what I think of Jeff the Killer. It's a very run-of-the-mill story, but for my recommendation for this number 6 spot, go listen to Mr. Creepypasta's version, because to me he is the definitive voice of Jeff the Killer, and adds that extra level of creepiness to an otherwise rather bland story. So yeah, Jeff the Killer, very run-of-the-mill. The story does have several problems, but it's not a bad start to kick off this list. Right, next entry.
Number 5.
Our next offering on this list, it is The Origin of Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack is yet another popular creepypasta character whose original story had him haunting a toddler, and eventually that toddler is killed in a very horrific way. But by no means was it creepy. However, this origin story, which is brought to us by Snuff Bomb, tells the tale of how Laughing Jack became so dark. The story begins with a young child named Isaac. Now this is during the 1800s England, if I remember correctly. Basically this kid has absolutely no friends. He is homeschooled by his mother, and both his mother and him are subjected to horrific abuse at home from his drunkard father. Being all alone, Isaac leads a very tragic life, until one Christmas when he gets a small decorative box from which springs Laughing Jack, but not the macabre monster that we've come to know. What springs from it is every child's idea of the perfect friend. Bright, colourful, and just able to pull anything from out of his sleeve as if he was Jim Carrey in The Mask. But over time, we see a gradual transformation on Isaac, which also influences Laughing Jack. And what we see in the transition is the literal loss of colour until it's nothing but a dull grey. That being said, from colour to the dull grey could represent the loss of innocence, because Isaac starts at the beginning of the story as any child would, very imaginative, very blissfully unaware of the majority of the evil in the world, but as he gets older he becomes more aware, and all that brightly colour is dissolving, which is what Laughing Jack could ultimately represent. But Jack takes it another step further as the story gets darker, creepier, and more macabre. I'm not going to spoil it, I'm just going to put a link up there to Mr. Creepypasta's reading of it, mainly because he sets the perfect atmosphere for this story. And out of all of the readings I've heard of this particular creepypasta, once again, it's an amazing production, and I would strongly urge you guys to check it out. If you've checked out the original Laughing Jack story and passed it off as somewhat mediocre, listen to this. Right, number 5 done. Now to the next entry, my friends.
Number 4.
Our next story comes to us from the channel Dr. Hora, and serves as a reminder that even though you may not go trick-or-treating or partying this Halloween, the horror could still hit you where you feel most safest, in your own home. The story presented to us is that of a young kid who stays at home on Halloween night, who does like most people do at this time of year, watch a bunch of scary-ass movies. Only this peace is disturbed when he is faced with the break-in of an unknown masked man, who proceeds to not only psychologically torture him, but also physically as well, leaving him traumatized and forever frightful of what could happen, which, like I said, serves as a cautionary tale. Remember to keep those back doors locked at night, you never know who's out there. Right, next on our list.
Number 3.
Our next story is brought to us by Lazy Masquerade, Now this particular story is one of 5 for this video, but it's the first one that I find so goddamn spine-tinglingly scary, because this could very well happen to anyone. The story is about a young boy who goes trick-or-treating with his younger sister and a couple of friends along with his father. And they go to a handful of houses, and the father comes back with a pixie stick, one for each of the kids, only to go home later and for his son to eat the pixie stick, who then ends up getting a stomachache and is admitted to hospital. And it's then discovered that the pixie sticks were laced with cyanide, enough to kill 2 fully grown adults. There's a huge investigation into where the pixie sticks came from, and this also causes panic in the adults of the area, who give in their candy to the police to be examined, which is understandable. But what's really disturbing about this tale is the one who actually laced those pixie sticks was the child's father. Because of his outstanding debts, he wanted to collect on the life insurance policies he had taken out on both of his children to pay off said debts. Now, parents, if you are really going to go with your children this Halloween, please take the message from this story. Make sure they only go to places that they are familiar with and people that they do know. This reduces the overall risk, and check the candy for any signs of alteration, because that could very well save their lives. Now, I must admit, there are a few other tales in the video that are relatively scary, but this first one was really shocking. That's why I put it up as number 3 on this list. Right, number 2 time, people.
Number 2.
Next up on our list is another creepypasta. Now, certain creepypastas are very cliche. You know, they follow a certain set of rules, formats, whatever. The same can be said with video game creepypastas. Someone gets nostalgia for a certain game, they get it through some questionable means, they then put it in, they start playing it, and a bunch of weird stuff happens. The same can be said for the next entry on my list, which is the Godzilla NES creepypasta. Now, you're probably wondering why I've put this one on here. Now, there have been a few people that have done their own interpretation of this story, including Mullet Mike from the Sticky Paddle. Mr. Creepypasta has also done a version of it. I'm pretty sure Creeps McPasta's done his own interpretation or his own production of it. But the one I'm bringing you today comes from Goji73. Now, while the story is told via third person, the way this is presented is first person, so it's much more immersive than any other production of this story. Overall, it is cliche, but I would say watch this one just for presentation alone. If you want maximum effect, full screen it, earphones, the works.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with number 1.
So, we've been through 5 tales to arrive here finally at number 1. And my personal number 1 creepiest story is the Russian sleep experiment. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, what makes this creepier than all the other entries on the thousands and thousands of creepypastas and other stories out there? Well, there's a number of reasons why it's my personal number 1. First of all, the author of this story is completely unknown, which adds a certain reality to it. Second of all, there's this time in which the story is set, which is the 1950s, which is when human experimentation was actually happening in the real world. If you look at the history of World War II, for example, if you are familiar with your history and also of a certain name, Dr. Joseph Mengele. And there's also talk of human experimentation that was going on during the Cold War as well. So this also adds to the reality of this story. Another thing that adds to this is the fact in the way it's written. It's written as a first-hand account slash medical report. Like this was actually witnessed by the person, whoever it was who wrote this. So that being said, given all of those criteria, it's easily my number one story. But the version I have to recommend very highly is the one done by Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Now, there have been plenty of people that have done readings of this before. Mr. Creepypasta, obviously. But what makes the Chilling Tales version of this story stand out above the rest is the fact that the narrator, Jesse Cornett, adds a Russian accent to the proceedings, which makes it all the more real and all the more chilling. The story also highlights the very bestial nature of mankind itself, which makes it all the more disturbing still, on top of everything that's already been presented to us. So, there we have it. Those are my top 6 scary stories. If you have any of your own, I'd like to hear about them in the comments section. Do you have a particularly favourite creepypasta? Share them with us. It's his the season after all. Right. That's the end of this video. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and a very happy Halloween to each and every one of you. So, until next time, see ya.